first off, thank you so much for making it here tonight. Now, if anybody ever go to parties that you don't know anybody at, getting kind of nervous when you go there? Okay. If you want to upset people, talk about religion, politics, or vaccinations, okay? Because none of them really have a basis in science. Now, the toughest part of this, flu shots, the politics of panic. Okay, and it's true, because when you look at this, there's a brilliant movie out now where it's called The Greater Good. Okay, we ordered about a dozen copies for our office, but they have a medical doctor that's pro-vaccination, then a medical doctor that's pro-science, and if you're pro-science, you're against vaccinations. You really are. And what's neat is it's actually a real fair comparison. You get this absolute ignorant point of view. Now, there was a brilliant quote: "To err is human, but to preserve the error is diabolic." So what I want you to do is just take a moment, even if you're absolutely pro-vaccination. Okay, let's find out why. Now, first off, how many people have seen this type of picture before? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's real popular. This can't happen. Do you understand how viruses work? Okay, now this is important, because how a virus works, a virus actually doesn't grow on its own. It's a parasite. Like if I was to sneeze on you, no, I won't. I like you. Okay, but if I was to give you a virus, that virus has to use your DNA in order to replicate. So if you give it to your brother, it's got to use his DNA.
Now think about this, with all these people giving away their DNA, Ancestry, 23andMe, African DNA, things like that. Could there be a chance that somebody could eventually make a weapon based upon DNA sequences?
So as it successively transfers person to person to person, it gets weaker and weaker and weaker. So you might be saying, well, how can we put that in a vaccine and protect everyone? You can't. It doesn't work that way. The science doesn't support it. But this fear really does. So now let's actually look at it. When I'm researching this, I love history. Okay, I mean, history is so wonderful, because it gives us like 20/20 vision. We just find out where we went. So if you look at this, the world pandemic, this is the one that everybody's advertising. It's fear sells. And they say between 20 and 50 million of the population of the world died, okay, from this massive virus. Well, that's kind of true, kind of not. It missed Greece. Okay, so I guess being Greek protects you. Well, not really. When you look at it, first off, World War I saw a huge number of our boys, our doughboys, went over to Europe, and it ended pretty quickly. It only lasted a couple of years because, the people and supplies were exhausted over there. So they had a plethora of unused vaccinations, so they had to sell them to the American public. So I don't know if you know this, but in 1917, 1918, they advertised, our boys are coming back, we don't know what kind of diseases they're bringing, line up, roll up your sleeves, we're going to protect you. Again, no science involved in this stuff. Now also, did you know that the patent for aspirin ran out in 1917? Did you know that? So they also treated all of these people with a cold with massive doses of aspirin. And what we find out in exhuming these bodies that have died, they died of bacterial pneumonia, not viral. I know it's kind of interesting, but so the vaccine manufacturers, now this was a book by Eleanor McBean. She says that the vaccines that were injected in the population were tremendous. There's no research behind it. Now, this is from 1918. There's an actual on-the-spot observer. Now, what he says in here was, they said it was amazing.
And does that sound familiar? A vaccination pushed into the public with no research behind it.
Strong men one day, the next day they were near dead. Okay, and the diseases, now this is a totally different illness. God, I almost said flu. It's a totally different illness that occurred back then. Now look at his description. It had characteristics of Black Death, added to typhoid, diphtheria, pneumonia, smallpox, and paralysis. So these people started to bleed, they started to cough up blood, their lungs filled up, paralysis, all the diseases that people had been vaccinated for immediately following the war. And when you look at this, as far as I could find out, and this was, the flu hit only the vaccinated. The people who refused the vaccines escaped the flu. You know, just like Greece, the entire country decided not to vaccinate. So now, could this have been different toxoids injected into the human body, weakening it? I don't know. Don't answer yet. Because the thing that bothers me is when somebody says, look, I didn't get the flu shot. Okay, why? What's your basis in it? I don't believe in it. No, this isn't religion. There's no belief system here. This is science. You make your decision based on science, not by some type of paranoia. Okay, so right now we're going to throw that away. We're going to only look at the science. Now this, what's interesting is between 1918 and 1919, they say 20 million people died, maybe. Okay, however, the flu virus wasn't identified until 1933. So we're talking a few decades go by before we say, oh yeah, now we know what it is. Okay, it would happen to be a virus, except that's not true. See, what's interesting, and this is Dr. Dan Duffy, what they found out was that it wasn't. Okay, so when people say, look, it was actually a flu virus that killed people, this was out of Emory University in Atlanta. They said that the discovery that it was not the flu that killed these people. So when you see those big signs that say it was the Spanish flu that killed people or the influenza virus, we now know that it was not the flu virus that killed those people. Okay, that the people in the epidemic died of bacterial infections such as strep. Okay, now you know what the ignorant people are going to say? And I say ignorant not because they're stupid, they just don't know. They say, well, yes, of course, okay, the flu virus weakened the person, then left without leaving a DNA trace, and then they developed bacterial pneumonia and then died. Any science behind that? No. So again, you know, it's kind of like a legend. Now, this is actually a book that was written in 1919, given to President Woodrow Wilson. And this guy was a researcher. His name's Dr. Charles M. Higgins, and he wrote Horrors of Vaccination. Now think of this. Okay, now anyone know what typhus is or typhoid fever? Okay, that comes from drinking polluted water and polluted systems, right? Can you vaccinate somebody with a vaccine and tell them to go out and drink polluted water? No, that's ridiculous. Okay, that's ridiculous. Well, this is interesting. This is actually a copy of the book. Many cases originally diagnosed as influenza in the American Expeditionary Forces have subsequently proven to be typhoid. Now, so what they said was, and this is the actual guy, okay, at the actual time, says that we thought it was influenza, but it wasn't really, it was actually typhoid. Now, and I love the American Expeditionary Forces, those were our doughboys over there. Atypical presentation, so it was not a normal presentation of typhoid, okay, it means that it presented differently. So if it was typhoid's usually from infected water or poor sanitary conditions. How did they get this atypical presentation? Okay, well, let's find out. Now, this is what he actually wrote, and he assumes that it was from the vaccinations that were given. And what he says is, therefore, has this crushing fact of the great danger of vaccination to human health and life enters the mind and consciousness of the mass of people, and it's fully grasped by the legislative and judicial and executive minds of the country, for whom it has so long been concealed by medical falsehoods in high places. This enlightenment, I firmly believe, will result in permanent abolishment of compulsory vaccinations, if not penal prohibition of general vaccinations. Okay, now think of this. What he just said, in much more eloquent English than what we speak today, is that it's been hidden, okay, by the medical community, that the actual medical procedures that they did in 1917 and 1918 that caused the death of all of these people, okay, they're the cause of it. Okay, they're absolutely the cause of it. I ask your careful attention in closing this exposure of vaccination horrors and medical mendacities. When was the last time you used mendacities in a sentence? Oh God, you gotta love the way they spoke. So now here they are. this is how we make a typhoid vaccination. So now let's say it's 1918, we want to sell some of this stuff. So what we do is we harvest the typhoid virus, and we can't really identify the typhoid virus or bacterium, which actually is a bacteria. So we get some pustules of it, and we can't inject this, because if you just inject the typhoid bacterium inside of human beings, you're going to cause typhus, okay? So this is how you make a vaccine. What you got to do is remember, if I give a virus or infection to some person, he gives it to another, what happens? Does it get weaker or stronger? It gets weaker. Okay, so what we do is we harvest that virus or bacteria or whatever we want to grow, and they injected it in pigs first. And it grew in the pigs, got the pigs sick, so then we harvested it out of the pigs, and then we put it in chickens. Because chickens are really neat, because they grow infected agents very, very quickly. And we allow it to...
Pause. No, does that sound familiar? What were they showing videos of in China burning alive as they dug massive graves for them? Pigs, right? Because they said, oh, this was a bat that got a hold of a pig, and once it got a hold of a pig, the pig spread it to the humans, so on and so forth, right? Now, what was the example? You collect this bacterial, you inject it into pigs. From pigs, you can test it on other things, such as animals or chickens, right? Well, instead of a pig, you test it on a bat. I'm just saying. Think about that, right? Although the symbolism for them using the bat this time around with this virus is really something. Symbolic. If you ever watch the Family Guy episode of what's it called there, the anti-vaccinators, it's one of the episodes when you watch it, you can't stand to watch it. You'll probably watch 10 minutes of it if you can stand that, and you're like, all right, this is just them pushing a subliminal message down their throat that you better not have a different view from being vaccinated, and if you are, there's a problem with you. And there's just a way of making fun of all those that don't believe in vaccinations or don't subscribe to vaccinations being the answer to a vitamin D deficiency. Yeah.
Fester in these living chicken eggs, and then we draw it off and we inject it in about 20 million people. Now I'm thinking, wait a second, I heard about this in 2009. See, the H1N1, anybody remember the pandemic in 2009? Anybody alive back then? No, you got to understand, your memories are really short. Okay, if it's not presented in a constant basis, do you remember the actual panic? There's a pandemic, it's going to wipe out the planet. It could kill between 200 million and 20 million. Do I hear 25 million? Sold. Where's the research in that? It's not. But what they said was, and this was a quote out of 2009 during the panic, the H1N1 virus is made up of components of human virus, avian, which is bird flu, and swine flu, a combination not possible in the natural world. And I thought, oh my gosh, I remember this. I was doing the research on the swine flu, and sure enough, there it is. So it's not possible in the natural world, but is it possible in the medical world? Yes or yes? Okay, good. Just checking. Okay, now, so what we got to know is, okay, I'm trying to tell you about the whole history of vaccines. Now, what do the proponents, the absolute ignorant people that promote vaccination say? Wiped out smallpox and wiped out polio. Really? Did it? Okay. Why didn't you get the flu shot this year? I don't believe it. No, forget the religion aspect. Okay, let's go in this. Did it wipe out smallpox? Well, first off, only 10% of the world's population was vaccinated with smallpox. Were they really good and hit the only 10% that had smallpox? Oh, is there something in the air? Okay, so no, that's ridiculous. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so what happens is, see, if you're trying to sell us a product, what you got to do is create a panic. So what they did is they went to the Philippines, which they really didn't have a smallpox epidemic, but let's go to the Philippines. They injected 3 million natives, 3,285,000 natives. Now what's interesting is after they started to inject the smallpox, because remember they're harvesting a virus out of pus they preserve it, they scratch the arms, and smallpox is actually a living virus. Okay, scratched in the arms. If anyone's, like over 50, you're going to have a little smallpox scar on there. Okay, so it's not really injected in. It's scratched and rubbed on there, and then you put a little tape over it. So people are walking around with a living virus. I know you don't want me close to you with the living virus now. Okay, well, okay, so what happens, so we inject 3 million of these people, and sure enough, 47,000 came down with smallpox. 16,000 of them died. So we take a population that didn't have a smallpox problem, and then 16,000 people died. So what does that do? Does that make you comforted or scared? Dude, next year, we inject twice as many, okay? 7 million people get vaccinated, okay? The problem is 44,000 died. Okay, and this is not just in the Philippines. The same thing happened in Japan, the same thing happened in China, but it created a world panic. Now, I'm sorry, what was the thing that people who were pro-vaccine and ignorant about health say? Wipe out smallpox or wipe out polio? Let's look at polio. Now, polio, I'll get people in, they'll be, 70, 80 years old. They've been in the medical world for a lot of years. And they say, look, I remember the iron lungs. I remember it going through. Really? Well, let's find out. So first off, 95% of everybody that got the polio, that got polio, recovered. It was just like a little cold. Okay, 5% came down with a little bit of more illness, muscle aches, stiff joints, things like that. It turned out that 1 out of every 1,000 actually had paralysis. So that we're talking 1/10 of 1% of the people that got polio really had a severe problem. Now why did it occur just in the 50s? What was the conditions like? Okay, see, remember, I'm under the assumption that the Spanish flu really wasn't the Spanish flu, that it occurred because of the medical practices and the environment. So what happened in the 50s? Well, let's take a look at this. Now, Vera Schneiber, a brilliant gal. See, at the time in the 50s, 2 diseases had the exact same symptoms, meningitis and polio. Now, polio was really, really high at the time. Meningitis was really low. So what they did is, if you got vaccine and you came down with the same symptoms, well, you couldn't have polio because you got the vaccine, so it was meningitis. So what she found out in the research is everyone got vaccinated with polio, but the meningitis cases went through the roof. So now when you hear aseptic viral meningitis or meningitis outbreak, think polio. Now what's interesting though, and this is out of the New England Journal of Medicine, just 1995, why injections increase the risk of polio is unclear. This means that all the vaccinations that we're giving today actually caused polio or polio-like symptoms. What she found out in research, if you had 1 shot, you had 8 times the amount. And this is shots of any type of variety. It turns out that injecting foreign proteins into your bloodstream causes a hypersensitivity to the immune system. If you've had 9 injections, 27 times more likely to get polio. 10, you can see polio increases. Now, what did the New England Journal of Medicine say? Why the injections increase the risk of polio, we just don't know. We don't, okay? Nevertheless, these studies and others indicate that injections must be avoided in countries with endemic poliomyelitis. Health authorities believe that all unnecessary injections should be avoided as well. Unnecessary injections. Which ones are necessary? Okay, let's actually find this out. Well, let's look way back in 1949, right before the epidemic, right before the polio epidemic. Now, this is European Medical Journal. Researchers have known since the early 1900s that paralytic poliomyelitis often started at the site of the injection. Okay, now, diphtheria, pertussis vaccines were introduced in the 1940s, and cases of paralytic poliomyelitis skyrocketed. Were you aware of this? Oh, what's the thing they're trying to scare you into getting? What was that? DPT. What's the P part stand for? I get pertussis. Oh, wait a second. You mean they're passing this out today? They're actually suggesting that it's good for our children to pass it out. Are they aware that it can cause further disease? And we knew this about 60 years ago. How about this one? This is out of 1992. Children who received the DPT, that's diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, were significantly more likely than controls to suffer paralytic poliomyelitis within 30 days. This study confirms that injections are the important provocative cause of poliomyelitis. That means it provokes it. That means injecting foreign proteins into the bloodstream is bad. It can cause an autoimmune disorder where the body attacks itself, where it destroys it. Were you aware of this? Are the people that...
So I just want you to think about that, right? I want you to think about all those movies and TV shows, especially the episodes they make, targeting people who do not vaccinate. And, there was a Law and Order episode, right? Mother didn't vaccinate her child, let her child play at a park. All of a sudden, the claim is that this woman's child came down with, I can't remember what it was, some virus, and this child spread it to all the other children who had been immunized. And I looked at my wife and I said, wait a minute. If this episode was about this child dying, right, and not being immunized and the mother being charged for murder, that would make sense for a Law and Order episode. But the fact that this child was sick and you're telling me others who had immunized their children were catching something they were immunized for, this one child could spread something that they were already supposed to be protected for through their flu shots or shots. I asked my wife, I said, what's the point of them taking the shots then? If one child can come in there and give it to all of them. I said, all this is an episode to make anybody who sits here and says, nah, I ain't about putting that stuff in my children, to feel bad. And to make them seem like you're the enemy, you're the problem. And it's saying here, with the polio, right? The polio started at the injection.
They're suggesting that you get it. Now, are vaccines required to get into school? I'm sorry, are vaccines required to get into school? Say it with me. No. Are vaccines required to get into school? No. Are vaccines required to get into school? No. Okay, because I got this mom in today, and it drove me crazy. She comes in, and I say, are vaccines required to get into school? Well, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. Okay, right here on this sheet, this is the law. There is no new law on the books that says they're not required. In California, we've got 3 exemptions. Medical, personal beliefs, or religious. I quote, it's in dark. Okay, so I make it really easy. Okay. Immunizations of a person shall not be required for admission to a school. Oh my goodness. They're not required. Okay? They're not required. Good. So the kids are safe. Now this is hugely important. Here's the polio vaccine. Now, do not look at this website, ouralexander.org, unless you got a box of tissues, okay? A couple, they're both into research. They inject their kid. They follow the absolute status quo. Their kid develops a brain tumor and dies. And they find out that it turns out that inside of the polio vaccine, there's a monkey virus. It's called the simian virus number 40. And this has led to huge growth in cancers of mesothelioma and medulloblastomas. It has to do with brain cancers. Now, there hasn't been a wild case of polio in about 60 years, but we're still injecting at 5 of them. So these researchers or parents, well, they used to be parents, their kid died. No, I guess you're still a parent if your kid died, right? You just have a dead kid, okay? Their kid was killed by vaccines, okay? And I don't make light of that. But you heard of MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers? That woman turned a tragedy into protecting thousands of kids. These parents, they were turning a tragedy of losing their son, okay, into protecting thousands. They're going up against the government, okay, which is huge. This guy won the Nobel Prize in 1913 for saying that, by gosh, avoid injections. If you inject foreign proteins into your bloodstream, The way your body works is it hypersensitizes the immune system. He coined the term anaphylactic shock, anaphylactic reaction. This means that the body is going to develop diseases. Now, he did this 30 years before the Lancet discovered that poliomyelitis occurs at the site of injections. He did it 20 years before the DPT shot was in there. Okay, so can you understand this? We knew this. We had the science behind this. Okay, so this is crazy. Now let's look at this. This is the World Health Organization. These are the number of vaccines that are required before the age of 5 in the countries. So we got Sweden way over here on the left, very low infant mortality. Only 5 kids per 1,000 die. Here's the United States with 36 shots before the kid's age of 5 and huge death rates, huge death rates. We're talking 8 per 1,000 die. And in fact, when you look at infant mortality rate, infant mortality is the ability of a child to survive 2 years. El Salvador has a lower infant mortality rate than we do. Okay, I mean, have you been aware of this? No, so it's time we change this. And this is why. So now when we look at this, what's the motivating factor behind this? Is it to get more living space? I don't know. Cheaper apartments? I don't know. Well, first off, when we go way back in 1986, there were 3 companies that were producing vaccines. Now, the government, and it was tough because vaccines, remember, foreign viral proteins injected into the bloodstream causes your body to die. It causes diseases, okay, that were virtually unknown. So if a company has got that, they were being sued. And sure enough, people were winning. So these companies found out that vaccines were really not profitable. So they went up to the government, and since our government, the politicians need a lot of money in order to run their campaigns, they funneled a ton of cash into the government and got this law passed in 1986. It's called the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. This means that if you run a company that manufactures vaccines, that you're no longer liable. If your product causes disease, you are no longer liable, you are absolved, you can't get sued. Pretty cool, huh? I know, you're doing a medical procedure that you can't get sued for. So now that was 1986, now this is kind of cool. So the number of companies went from 3 companies making manufacturing vaccines to 8 companies manufacturing vaccines. Why? Because it became the most profitable portion of the pharmaceutical industry. Now in 1983, we were injecting about 10 vaccines per kid. Okay, and this is before the age of 5, 10. Now in 2010, we're injecting about 38 vaccines per kid before 10. Okay, so that means, I'm sorry, why do we quadruple the number of vaccines in those years? Were there massive epidemics or anything like that? What was the autism rates back in 1983? So right now, you understand, the vaccine companies cannot be sued for it. Okay, in fact, the pediatricians can't even be sued for it. Okay, nobody can be sued for it. So what I did, I gave you this. This is really cool. Okay, so let's say you get, because anybody here, obviously you're not going to get vaccinated after you hear this information, but you're going to go home, you're going to talk to your sister, you're going to talk to your niece, you're going to talk to your brother, you're going to talk to your neighbor, and they're going to say, oh no, I'm going with my doctor. Right, okay. So here is the warranty of efficacy. See, this actually causes the physician, before he does the medical procedure on your child, to be responsible. I am a doctor. I am responsible for the medical procedures and the procedures I do to my patients. I am totally responsible. Okay. And I see about 250 people a day. So I'm a very responsible guy. These guys aren't responsible for shooting your kids or you, but this makes them responsible. So what they got to do, they got to fill this out. And then they go through and look at page 2 and they say, look, we know that these ingredients cause cancer, they cause neurologic damage, they cause diseases. And these are the vaccines that he's injecting or trying to protect your child for, and he's aware that these ingredients are toxic, dangerous, and can cause cancer and neurologic damage. So he's taking responsibility for this. Then, is it SCV40 virus in here? He realizes that the SCV40 virus is linked to brain cancers, and he's taken certain precautions to protect your child. I don't know what precautions he's going to take, but he's taking them. So at least he's taking responsibility. And then on the back page, he actually goes in, gets a notary, signs it, says, if your child develops paralysis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, major neurological damage, you can take his license. Isn't that nice? Okay, now, I don't realize, I really don't think any physician will sign this, but by God, it'll make him think a second time, okay? Isn't that nice? I know, that's what I was thinking. It was really cool. Okay, so when we look at this is the standard vaccine dose, roughly if you're following the American Board of Pediatrics. I go in and I can't tell you how many parents I do. How many vaccines does your kid get? I don't know, 8 or 10. That's the typical answer. No, my kid's 5. He's pretty much done. No, that's not true. Okay, do you realize that you're going to get around 74 doses of 16 different viruses until you're about 16 to 17. Now, if you're an adult, you're going to get an annual flu shot. If you're going along with this, you're going to get a booster of tetanus and diphtheria about every 5-6 years. So by the time you're about 60, and there's no studies on getting a flu shot every year, what that does to your immune system or your brain. Well, actually, that's not true. Dr. Russell Blaylock, who wrote this, Vaccines and Brain Damage, says if you get 10 flu shots in a row, your risk of Alzheimer's and brain damage increases tenfold. Okay, so there is some research out there, just not funded by the government. So when we look at this, do vaccines protect us? Well, we can, again, I dig history. History is so good because we get 20/20 vision. We can look back. Now, there is a vaccine against tuberculosis. Now, this came out a few years ago. America said no to it. God knows why. We probably didn't have the patent. Okay, probably involved some other country. So now you're looking at the death rate from tuberculosis falling on these charts and when the vaccine was introduced. And you're going to see this pattern develop a lot where the death rates from the disease were already declining or almost non-existent, and then the vaccine was introduced. Guess what was hailed as the savior of the disease? It was always the vaccine. Well, this is America. America didn't do the vaccine. Now, what they found out, and this is kind of like shoot, fire, aim. Shoot, aim. Okay. I'm sorry, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to aim first and then shoot, right? Okay. Well, what we're doing is we're shooting first and then finding out the results. It turns out that if you've had two shots of this tuberculosis virus, and this was out of the study out of Lancet, that it caused tuberculosis. You had a higher rate. So you're getting the vaccine to protect you, and if you had 2 shots of the vaccine to protect you, it actually caused tuberculosis. The old term was consumption. Okay, so now here, were you aware of that? Okay, good, just checking. Okay, good. So now these are the different diseases. Now this is pertussis, okay, the decline of death rates and when it was introduced. This is, this was pertussis again in vaccine and Wells. This one here was influenza. This one here is scarlet fever. These are all the decline of diseases. What I want you to understand is diseases were declining because of healthy sanitary conditions, good road systems, so we actually got appropriate nutrients, okay, and good sewage, good sanitation. It's not the vaccines. It's not injecting foreign viral proteins that caused it. Now, do they protect? Do they protect? Well, I don't know. Let's look at the actual facts of outbreaks. Now, this was in 2001, chickenpox outbreak. See, if you go in, and let's say you're responsible parents or responsible citizens, and you sign that waiver, what the school's going to say is, when we get an outbreak, you take your child out of school. Cool with me. I don't understand how that works. Does anybody? I mean, if my kid's not vaccinated, isn't my kid the only one at risk? I mean, there's some BS out there called herd immunity, but that just doesn't happen. That's ridiculous, okay? Where we, vaccinate a whole bunch of people. I mean, that's just legend. That's religion stuff, okay? But this stuff here, 86% of the chickenpox outbreak, they were already vaccinated. This one here was a measles outbreak in Texas in 1985. 99% of them were vaccinated. So I guess the chickenpox vaccine and measles vaccine doesn't really protect you.
That's another one. How many of you had the chickenpox vaccination and still got the damn chickenpox? And it's like, wait a minute, then why did you get them in the first place?
Pertussis. In 1993, 90% of the people that had the outbreak were vaccinated. I'm sorry, does that mean that pertussis vaccine doesn't really work? Okay, this one here, 92% of mumps were vaccinated. Any study that shows that these protect at all? At all? None. Okay, now this, NBC. I'm sorry, you can't really go along with newspaper or TV because 46% of newspaper and TV advertisements are from the pharmaceutical industry. So you know, you got to kind of, it's really not fair for me to use ridiculous bad news. But why not? You know, it's kind of like kicking below the belt. You know, it's okay. Chief medical editor, okay, Nancy, God, I almost said something bad word for her, but she's the chief medical editor for NBC. Issued a standing order. The reason the outbreaks are occurring because of the unvaccinated. Really? Any science behind that? No, that's ridiculous. Okay, vaccines actually never prevent the spread of a disease. This is how vaccines are manufactured today in 2011. Remember, a virus is a parasite. It needs living tissue. So whether you inject it in human diploid tissue, which is from human fetuses, or horse tissue, or pig tissue, or chicken tissue, it needs that to go in there. You inject it, it festers, you draw it off, you gelatinize it, preserve it, and then you inject it in a human being. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, aren't there wild viruses in here? Yes, there are. Okay, so it's not effective. So let's look at what the World Health Organization says if you're going to build a vaccine. Let's say you want to build a vaccine. Anybody in here? Okay, good. Excellent, good. So what you got to do is understand, and this is what they say on their website, on the World Health Organization. These guys buy vaccines for the entire world. Okay, they say that it's really difficult. Different strains of pertussis have been purified by different methods. For these reasons, the protective efficacy in humans of various manufacturers' products may be based on different mechanisms, which complicates direct comparison of the protective activity of various products and new formulations by means of simple laboratory tests. This means since different manufacturers, different companies, have different ways of making this vaccine, we can't really test it in the laboratory. So I know what you're thinking. Save the rat, test it on the kids. Dude, I'm with you there. Okay, so what's cool is, you know, if you like mice and you don't like kids, okay, indeed, no unequivocal immunological correlates of protection against pertussis have yet been demonstrated, nor has a generally accepted animal model to predict the clinical efficacy has been validated. In English, this means we've never seen an animal study that actually causes pertussis to work, and we don't know how it works in humans. Dude, save the rat. Okay, so what they're going to do is they're going to check it on the population, and then we're going to see if it caused harm. Okay, just, you know, okay, I just like the lack of science there. Now, this is an actual study out of Lancet. No, the Cochrane database. They said there is 0% effectiveness of the influenza vaccine in kids. 0% effectiveness. However, in 2002, the U.S. government said we can now inject kids under 5. Okay, this right here, this red line here, is the death rates of kids from the flu. Before the vaccination and after the vaccination. Did death rates after the vaccination climb? Huge. So let's look at the actual clinical data. Now this is the sheet that comes. This is the, well, actually booklet. No, you didn't get this one. Okay, this is doctor stuff. See, I'm a doctor, so I can actually read this stuff, okay? But I'm going to show you. Okay, now this is the clinical data sheet that doctors are supposed to actually read so that they can decide whether it goes into patients. Okay, now what's interesting here is on the front page it says, no clinical studies demonstrating a decrease in influenza disease after vaccination have been performed. So a doctor's read this, and he looks at this, and he's got a bunch of vials that he just purchased, and it says it's never been shown to be effective in helping with the disease I'm going to vaccinate for. Okay, so anyway, we know that it causes illness, and we know it's not effective. And then let's find out. is influenza is the illnesses that people get affected with during the winter time, okay, which is actually vitamin D deficiency season. There's no such thing as flu season. But are those diseases from influenza?
Now think about that too, right? Who suffers the most from vitamin D deficiencies? People who need sunlight the most, right? You would think melanated people. Now, who are they saying are the ones who are suffering the most from COVID? Blacks, which is ignorant, just to honest. Well, let's not get into that. But blacks and what? Mexican Americans and Native Americans. What do these three people have in common? Higher levels of melanin in their pigmentation. Just saying.
Well, not the research. The research says no. Rhinovirus is the most common.
Stop right there. Right there. Look in right there in the red. You see that? Coronavirus, 23% of a flu-like illness are caused by the influenza virus. Now, this video was recorded 9 years ago, it says. Right there in the red.
Virus is another one. We're talking influenza A from influenza. Well, not the research. The research says no. Rhinovirus is the most common. Coronavirus is another one. We're talking influenza A and B is maybe 10%, and the one we're vaccinating for maybe about 1 to 2%. So you get about 99% chance if you get a cold, it's not from influenza. Then we look at the different studies. This is driving me crazy because when you look at this, it's a toxic, ineffective product. Archives of Pediatric and Adolescent Medicine, they're saying its significant influenza vaccine effectiveness could not be demonstrated for any season, age, or setting. It's not effective. Lancet, never been effective. New England Journal of Medicine, never been effective. Journal of Respiratory and Critical Care, never been effective. National Institute of Health, Lancet, we concluded that the frailty selection bias and use of non-specific endpoints such as all-cause mortality have led cohort studies to greatly exaggerate vaccine benefits. This is the kind of stuff I read all day long. If that doesn't make sense in English, boil it down to the last sentence, okay? Greatly exaggerate vaccine benefits. That means the stuff doesn't work. Okay, in English. It's really simple. So now we're going to punish you. Let's say that you're in a healthcare profession. You're a healthcare professional, you work in some type of environment, you're aware that it's a toxic, cancer-causing, brain-damaging product, and you choose, because you're an independent human being, you choose not to get it, so they're going to punish you. You know what they do? They say you're going to have to wear a mask. Okay, so I have about 300 nurses as patients, okay, and I go in and I say,
There it is, see? 9 years ago. Excuse me. What's the punishment? You have to wear a mask. Now listen to this. Why would you just follow the most simplest thing and wear a mask? Think about other people. You are literally have us all out here tripping over a vitamin D deficiency. That I give you credit. It seems that you have found a way to add a bacteria to this to weaponize it. But this is insane. This reminds me of that doctor, right? Lex Will did a video on it, where that doctor, he came out and stated that he agreed that yes, there is a plan, there is an agenda to kill off black people. And he said at the end of the video, black people, if I were you, go out and stock up on what? Vitamin D.
Study out there that shows that a mask stops the transmission? Any study out there that shows if you get a vaccination that you're less of a carrier? No, there isn't. Well, why are they doing, aren't they supposed to be institutes of science or health? I mean, don't they use that stuff? So I actually find it. Think of this. I mean, this is what I do during the day, okay? I actually think, are there any studies out there that shows that masks are effective? No, they're not. There's no difference. If you wear a mask, viruses are small. It doesn't help you get it. It doesn't stop you from giving it. It's ridiculous. This one drives me crazy. Pregnant women and vaccination. Now, this is an actual quote off of this sheet of paper, okay? Now, they're recommending pregnant women to get the flu shot. Animal reproductive studies have been conducted. It's not known if it causes fetal harm when administered to a pregnant woman, and it's never been tested for carcinogenesis, which means we don't know if the flu shot causes cancer or mutates into the kid. We don't know. Are they recommended for pregnant women? Yes or yes? Yes. Okay, how many people in here are in the healthcare industry? Good. Is it injected in pregnant people? Yes, it is. Okay, good. Here we go. The CDC, now this is National Coalition of Organization of Women. This was in the pandemic, and this shot was the H1N1, you know, the different one that injected it. Now what they said was the rate of miscarriages and stillbirths when you inject it in a pregnant woman increased 2,500%. So that means over 3,000 kids died from this vaccine injected in pregnant women. Now, if the pregnant women knew this could cause a spontaneous abortion, whatever your feeling is, you know, at least let them know. We know it's not effective in preventing the flu, and it may cause a spontaneous abortion. But what does it do if you're just female? What does it do to your reproductive organs? We don't know if it causes cancer or mutates. Does this mean that it may cause sterility later on? We don't know. We don't know. We don't know why it kills people like this. So now what's interesting, they present this to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. And this guy, their doctor, he said that sure enough, the data confirmed a 2,500% increase in stillbirths and spontaneous abortions if it's been given to pregnant women. Now that's out of the vaccine adverse reporting system. Now, you know, I'm not saying it's population control. I think it's just flat out ignorance. So now here's something. That was 2009. Guess what's in the 2011 shot? Survey says, yes, the same thing that was in 2009, H1N1. Now, are there any warnings in there? I go up to get some distilled water from the CVS pharmacy. I pass 4 of them on the way to my office. Okay, and I see H1, you know, the flu shot, get the flu shot, get the flu shot, get the flu shot. I don't see anything in there with a big, you know, pregnant woman with a red line going through. If you're pregnant, don't get this. I haven't seen those. Okay, but there should be. Now, Chris Shaw, now this guy is genius. Okay, this guy is an actual researcher. I'm sorry, what a researcher is? Let me explain this to you. You take a substance, you inject a group of subjects, okay? Then you inject a group of subjects with a placebo. Then you follow a control group, and you follow that group of subjects. Now, the government is choosing to inject human beings. He actually picked rats. I'm sorry about the rat, I know, okay. But he picked rats. And what he did was he tested only 2 ingredients, okay, but he only tested them one at a time. So he tested the aluminum. Now, the aluminum he tested because that's a great adjuvant. See, they mix adjuvants in there so it allows the vaccine to stay in the body longer. I mean, that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to keep that toxin in your system so you mount an immune system response. And what he found was this massive neurologic, well, what he did, here, let me describe this first. He injects the aluminum, then he injected squalene, then he injected saline in different groups, not the same group, and then he had a control group, and he followed these mice through their life cycle. At the end of the life cycle, he sacrificed the mice, looked at the brains, looked at the liver, looked at the organ systems, and he said it was amazing. Now he wasn't researching vaccines. He was researching Lou Gehrig's disease. He was researching these autoimmune disorders. And he was having a real great tough time with it. And then he found out, oh my gosh, Gulf War syndrome from the 1991, that they had the exact same type of symptoms. And he thought, what was different in the Gulf War? Well, they all had the same type of neurotoxin, so we thought it might be from the neurotoxin. And sure enough, when they sacrificed the animal, he said, oh my God, this totally creeped us out. We weren't out there to poke holes in vaccines, but all of a sudden, oh my God, we've got neuron death. Sure enough, here's 3 videos that describe the neuron death from the neurotoxins inside of all the vaccines that are injected into our population, into the kids and the adults. Now, what's wild is when you look at this, and we're talking placebo-controlled trials. Okay, what's placebo-controlled trials? Anybody know what a placebo is? It comes from the Latin word means to please. It means that there's an innocuous substance you inject in there, and there's no response typically. So when a doctor looks at this doctor sheet, what they're going to do, they're going to go back here, because they don't have a lot of time to look at this. I mean, why actually research the medical procedures you're going to do? What you're going to do is you're going to look... I'm sorry, is my sarcasm showing? Okay, it's my mom. My mom taught me sarcasm. Okay. Yeah, your mom too, so don't laugh. Okay, so what you do, since you don't have a lot of time, you look at this and you compare placebo with the drug. Placebo with the drug. That's what you do. Then you look at this and you think, oh my God, what they used for placebo, they had a mercury-containing placebo. Now, mercury, we know, is deadly toxin. It's like the third deadliest poison that you could put in the system. So what they're doing to test this, they actually put a neuropoison, a neurotoxin in there and injected a group of people so that placebo-controlled studies don't look toxic. Is that criminal? No, it's not. It's actually legal. Okay, so what we go in here is you can't sue them. Okay, so then, now this is interesting. Now this is another one. This was done out of Poland. Okay, now again, what they did, they actually took a group of mice that were just recently born, just like we do with our children's studies, and they injected them with the amount, not the whole neurotoxins, just appropriate chemicals. Okay, not the entire vaccine. They're just checking like aluminum and some of the neurotoxins that we know are in there in rats, and they found out the suckling rats in a vaccination-like manner at doses analogous to those used in pediatric vaccines, they had higher injuries to neurons, severe brain regions. So this means that they actually saw the death of neurons in the brains by doing the same thing that we do to kids. Now this was done just last year in Poland. Now, should this study have made the evening news? Oh my God, the procedures that we're doing to our kids are damaging their neurons. It's damaging the brain. Well, not really. In this country, when we look at it, 1 out of 5, this means 20% of our kids now have brain damage. Okay? That means 14% of them are actually enrolled in special needs schools. We are losing a generation. We are losing a generation. This is something that parents, grandparents, and neighbors need to stop now. Now, I do have some patients that are a little bit more aggressive than me. I know that's hard to believe. But they actually go in, and they've been removing signs from the pharmacies. And I had one guy who's in his 70s that comes back with a stack of these signs that he stole, and he said, look at this, baby. You know, I can't really promote that. You know, yeah, dude. But we got to. Enough is enough. This is ridiculous. It's unscientific. These doctors are doing stuff that thou shalt do no harm. Okay, they're harming people. When you look at this, 1 in 38 boys. Why are our kids more autistic? Okay, or boy children more autistic than female children? We don't know. Why is autistic rampant? We don't know. The studies aren't being done. It's more cost effective to shoot first and deal with it later. Well, if anybody says that we're just better at diagnosing it, say the year 2031. Do you know why 2031 is important? Because if current healthcare trends continue, this means that people are not going to watch these videos. They're not going to get educated. They're just going to go along. 2031 is the year that the number of autistic children will outnumber the kids without autism. Are there a tremendous amount of 60-year-old autistic people? No, but there are 20-year-old. There's a huge number of teenagers that are autistic. Okay, so this is going to be a drain. This is the tipping point that's going to wipe out the economy unless we do things right now. See, I'm talking about finances because finances is what's driving this. It's not human. It's not love of people, but it should be. I mean, each one of these kids, if you're looking at it, they've got pressure on the nervous system seen by their x-rays. Each one of them had multiple antibiotics, which means their normal gut flora is wiped out. They've had multiple vaccinations. They had multiple symptoms. They all had asthma. They all had breathing problems. They all had digestion problems. And 100% of them got better. 100% no longer have asthma. What's our success rate in curing childhood asthma? 100%. Why? Because they all have the same physiology. You stop poisoning kids, you give them appropriate nutrients, appropriate enzymes, have them break down the products, clear that nervous system, and they get better. Is that neat? Yes or yes? Next week, we're going to talk about how to detox from the poisoning that we got, that we're given to our kids. We're going to talk about the detox of poisoning from you, how your body can metabolize nutrients. Okay, I got to thank you so much for making it here, because this is vital. This is vital. You now have a responsibility, though. Okay, you just took the blue pill. Remember the Matrix? You can't forget this. You have to go out. Okay? Good. Thank you very much.